So far throughout this impeachment inquiry, William Barr has kept a relatively low profile, which has frustrated me to no end. The lack of attention to William Barr and his early efforts to avoid this scandal ever coming to light, which we will talk about. But there's some new reporting about William Barr and one way that he wouldn't help Donald Trump to get out from under this pressure he's facing. President Trump apparently wanted Attorney General William Barr to hold a news conference declaring that the commander-in-chief had broken no laws during a phone call in which he pressed his Ukrainian counterpart to investigate a political rival. Though Barr ultimately declined to do so, people familiar with the matter said. And so, when this was initially coming out, Donald Trump wanted William Barr to hold a formal press conference where he would just declare that he had done nothing wrong. And honestly, I sympathize a little bit with Donald Trump in how he had wanted that and then was stymied by William Barr because, I mean, why not? Back when the Mueller report was about to be released, William Barr decided to make his own Cliff Notes version of it, got out in front of it with a bunch of lies, a bunch of deception, and the media ran with it for a couple of days. And for all we know, that irreparably changed the public's perception of what the Mueller report eventually ended up actually containing. And so if he did it with Mueller, why not in this case? And yet William Barr refused to do that. The request for it, by the way, came around September 25th when the administration released a rough transcript or summary transcript of the phone call between Zelensky and Trump. And so I don't know if they say it came around that time. I don't know if it came a few days before, a few days after. I'm imagining after because Donald Trump really did seem to believe that releasing that transcript was going to end this thing, and nothing did more to throw fuel on the fire of the impeachment inquiry, what would eventually become the impeachment inquiry, than releasing that transcript. So that was clearly not enough. Perhaps a press conference would have been enough to back the pressure off of him. And that might seem crazy or naive considering where we now are. I mean, it really does look like he's going to be impeached now, but that's not what it looked like on September 25th or that week. At that point, Nancy Pelosi, she still did not believe that impeachment was warranted, thought it would be too dangerous when it came to the election. Dozens and dozens and dozens of Democratic representatives in the House hadn't yet come out in favor of impeachment. We were still being pitched as crazy people for thinking it would ever happen. And yet it indeed did, although it might not have if William Barr had given him what he wanted. Now, what's interesting about this, and we're gonna get into Trump's denial that this happened, his attacks against the reporters at the Washington Post who came out with this. But apparently Trump not only asked him to do this, but he's been whining about it ever since, which makes it way easier for anonymous sources to eventually leak the information. The president has mentioned Barr's demurral to associates in recent weeks, saying he wished Barr would have held the news conference. You idiot, it was an attempted cover-up and you keep complaining about it. He's really bad at this, okay? It almost makes you believe that whole he's too dumb to quid pro quo thing. But anyway, we return to Donald Trump, who is responding to this reporting coming out, saying things like, Bill Barr did not decline my request to talk about Ukraine. The story was a fake Washington Post con job with an anonymous source that doesn't exist. Just read the capitalized transcript. The Justice Department already ruled that the call was good. We don't have freedom of the press. That is true. The Justice Department did put out a formal press release saying the call was good. But anyway, what's interesting about that tweet is like you start to get distracted by all the nonsense later on, but look again at that first sentence. Bill Barr did not decline my request to talk about Ukraine. No, that's the second tweet. But so you did ask him to do it, right? And he didn't do it. So he seems to have declined. You asked him to do something that makes you look really bad. You're admitting that on social media. And he didn't end up doing it, unless it was just a press conference that nobody showed up to. I don't know, that gets into like the Zen koan of the tree in the woods thing. But anyway, that had the admission. He did double down, saying the story in the Amazon Washington Post, of course, picked up by the fake news CNN, saying President Trump asked for AG Barr to hold a news conference clearing him on Ukraine is totally untrue and just another fake news story with anonymous sources that don't exist. The lamestream media, which is the enemy of the people, is working overtime with made up stories in order to drive dissension and distrust. So just brief mention, because I feel like we should never actually normalize this. When he feels pressure from a major news organization for doing reporting that makes him look bad, he once again went back to calling them the enemy of the people. So if you don't like the Washington Post, the president feels like maybe you should take that into your own hands and do something about it, because it's your enemy, capitalized, the enemy of you and all of the other people. And by the way, what an Orwellian place we've gotten to. Those two tweets I just saw, the first and then the continuation. I mean, he throws in fake news CNN, that Amazon owns the Washington Post, the sources aren't made up, the lamestream media, the enemy of the people. All we're at as a people now is just a series of fake, deceptive, propagandistic catchphrases, and you just string those together with the occasional verb, and that is a communique from the president, official communication. He again said, now there's a reason I'm reading multiple of these. He says, the degenerate Washington Post made up the story about me asking Bill Barr to hold a news conference. Never happened, and there were no sources. So that's interesting for two reasons. One, the idea that the Washington Post had a meeting of all of their staff and they're like, what would be a good story? Let's say he asked Barr to shut it down. And also to claim that that happened after 2 tweets earlier, you said that you asked him to do it. Really bizarre. I can't make heads or tails of it, but perhaps a Trump supporter actually could. Now, the reason I read that he's done multiple tweets about this is that this reaction that he's having to this story is really strong. He's really incensed by it, and it reminds me, perhaps it reminds you, of how he responded to the story about James Comey being fired. Under seemingly very similar circumstances. With James Comey, he desperately wanted him to publicly clear him of any of the sort of shadow that was hanging over his presidency relatively early on in the months after his inauguration. That whole fight, by the way, did not work out well for Donald Trump. It is what, after all, launched the Mueller report. He also had a similar relationship with Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions committed one sin in the eyes of Donald Trump, and that was that he was not sufficiently loyal in publicly clearing Donald Trump of all of the accusations against him. And again, I'll go back to the core principle of fascism is loyalty to the individual. Donald Trump demands that. That is what he wants. And William Barr here is not being sufficiently loyal. Now, Trump has not thrown him under the bus yet. He hasn't fired him either, perhaps because William Barr has been very helpful to Donald Trump since he came into the administration. I mean, that was his only qualification, was that he would do what Sessions and Comey would not. We know, I already talked about what he did during the Mueller report, and it will be interesting to watch in the near future how that relationship plays out, because Barr did what he could initially, before we even knew about this story, to make sure that we never found out about it. When the whistleblower put forward his initial complaint, the DOJ crushed it. They were like, there's nothing to this, we're not gonna do any interviews, we don't care, there's nothing here. And under normal circumstances, that might have led to this story never happening, because we wouldn't be talking about any of this, because we wouldn't know about any of this. Thankfully, the whistleblower did not let it die there, and thus we end up where we're at. But William Barr, a guy who is implicated in this scandal, although nobody pays attention to it, from day one, before day one, has been trying to shut down any investigation into it. That is a massive conflict of interest, a conflict of interest that continues to this day because William Barr still heads the DOJ. And while he might have done the right thing in not doing this press conference, he's still there as a loyal Trump supporter who believes that his position as AG has nothing to do with an obligation to the American people and everything to do with an obligation to protect Donald Trump. He needs to be brought into this. Democrats should be talking about William Barr. They should be making sure that he either is recused from this entire investigation, anything having to do with it, or is replaced by someone who actually understands what the position of AG is meant to accomplish. So far, we haven't gotten there, but God, I really hope that we have some movement in that direction. Thank you for watching this clip from the Damage Report. For more content from the show and access to TYT Network members-only exclusives, go to tyt.com/Brooke. Wait, no, it's tyt.com/John. Go to tyt.com/John to sign up.